You are listening to Packers Talk Radio Network.
Packers Talk.
Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or non-profit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If a Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Alert, clear all channels.
Fresh from America's Dairyland,
ladies and gentlemen,
From the Benches Podcast.
touchdown Packers. Go
Packers Talk Radio Network. You're listening to From the Benches with Ross Uglum and Ryan Hilsland.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to From the Benches. We hope you enjoyed the 2016 NFL Draft Preview Offense Edition. We're going to do a little bit of defense today. My name is Ross Uglum. I'm a writer at Packers Talk and CheeseheadTV.com. And with me, as always, is Ryan Hilson. Ryan, how are you on this Monday morning?
Doing just fine. Had a good, enjoyable weekend, and it is NFL Draft Week officially. We're just a couple of days out from the first round on Thursday, and it's an exciting week. It's a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. As you guys have noticed, the offensive preview was released on Sunday, and we discussed Don Barclay's re-signing. We discussed the Denver outside linebacker signing with the Packers, and there really hasn't been anything more to discuss. So we're kind of going to blow through the normal news portion of the show because, quite frankly, there just is no news. But we have seen a couple of articles and some analysis that I want to talk about briefly, and that is this idea that Ted Thompson kind of started last year by converting Demarius Randall from safety to corner. There's been a few mock drafts that I've seen that have Ted Thompson maybe drafting a big, strong safety and moving him to weak inside linebacker. A couple of names, and we'll talk about these when we break down the safety position. Jeremy Cash of Duke, Su'a Cravens of the University of Southern California, both come to mind. Ryan, what are your thoughts on specifically those two guys, and then just in generally, maybe using a safety who isn't the greatest cover guy as the other inside linebacker with Jake Ryan?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't know about it as a full-time option, but it certainly seems like something that that Ted Thompson is on board with, and that the defenses would be able to take advantage of. I mean, we've seen that a little bit with. We've talked about Micah Hyde kind of playing that role as kind of like a dime linebacker. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold this morning.
Ryan's playing hurt.
We've seen. We've seen kind of experiments with that. It's been tossed around on a pretty limited snap basis. So I don't know about it as a full time option, but I could see it with two of those guys you mentioned, both with Cash and Cravens, more than the guys that we have on the roster currently. But it's something that is certainly an option. But I don't know that I would necessarily get all the way behind it as the full-time answer to that other inside linebacker spot. But it would be an option as far as maybe more as a part-time solution.
Yeah, if you got into it, I wouldn't mind, like Barrington and Ryan on first down and then sending Barrington to the sideline and playing Cash or Cravens. I think the tough part about doing it with Micah Hyde is Micah Hyde's a corner convert, and there just isn't that much to Micah Hyde. He's a pretty good tackling corner, a questionable tackling safety, and definitely not the kind of guy you want at the linebacker position. And that's certainly not being disrespectful to Micah Hyde. It's just there are only so many things that you can ask a fifth-round pick to do. And the Packers have asked a lot of Micah Hyde, and I think he's a hell of a football player. I just don't want him playing linebacker. I feel like that's fair.
Right. I guess it is fair to say that we haven't. The Packers haven't done that with a highly drafted guy, somebody who's a little bit more capable of it. But it's still not something I think I would necessarily want to be happening.
Right,
as a full-time solution.
Yep, and I mean you've seen it done around the league as well. Deion Buchanan with the Cardinals, and boy, would we sure like to have a defense like the Cardinals. Not saying that one of these guys would automatically make it like that, but Deion Buchanan is on the field for Arizona a lot at that weak inside linebacker position, and he's a safety. He was a guy that was widely mocked to the Packers the year they took Clinton Dix, but just got too hot at the last second and ended up as a first-round pick a little bit after Green Bay went. Plus, Green Bay had obviously already taken care of the safety position in that draft. So, Ryan, let's dive into the defensive preview. We hope you enjoyed, obviously, the offensive part of everything that came out on Sunday evening. And we'll dive into kind of the position that has been mocked to Green Bay the most, and that would be defensive line. It's actually one of the two positions, and we'll talk about the next one next, that I did the film study and the analysis for in the Cheesehead TV draft guide, which you can, of course, pick up on cheeseheadtv.com for $8.99. Ryan, how badly do the Packers need to draft at least one defensive lineman in their first six? And just for anybody that's listening to this that didn't listen to the offensive podcast, the Packers have 6 selections in the first 4 rounds, and with the way that McCarthy and Thompson run this program, often players drafted in round 1 through 4, a la, basically everyone from last year. You can see Jake Ryan by the end was a starter. Players drafted in 1 through 4 kind of have to be contributors, so that's why we're definitely talking about the first 6. So, Ryan, how badly do the Packers need to draft a defensive lineman in the first 6?
I think they need to take one. There is a bit of a need for some high end depth on the defensive line. We're going to see Dayton Jones playing more outside linebacker. We've got the departure of B.J. Raji. Obviously, you still have Mike Daniels, still have the Troy Guion, still have Mike Pennell when he gets back from his 4-game suspension. There's some guys there, but I could see wanting to add some top end of the draft type of talent to throw into that defensive line mix, into that rotation, and hopefully maybe to turn into a full-time type of player down the road. But there's a need to add some depth there. There have been some departures along the defensive line, so I think you take one in the first 6 picks. I don't necessarily think you have to take. We were talking about this a little bit before we started the show that I don't think either of us think we see the need to take defensive linemen twice in the first 3 rounds. I don't think that's necessary. I think highly enough of the guys on the roster right now that we don't need that kind of an influx of draft talent. But I would like to see them go with a guy either in the first round, maybe a guy, or in the second or third. But I would like to see one guy taken high to provide some depth, to provide a little influx of talent along that rotation. But I think it is is just one guy that we need to draft.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've done some fan speak mocks and gone like a guy in round 1 and a guy in round 4, a guy in round 2 and a guy in round 4. Even round 5, I think like DJ Reader from Clemson is a guy that if they get a pass rusher in the first 2 rounds, like a Vernon Butler or an Ashawn Robinson, a guy like that, taking Reader in the later rounds as a guy who's just a pure run stuffer but a very talented one, I think that kind of gets done what you have to get done, and that's fine. So the next question we can obviously skip, which is how bad do the Packers need to draft him? We've already said that they need to get 1, probably 2 guys in their 9 picks just because of can you really count on a Josh Boyd? Well, I don't know. Can Christian Ringo make the jump to the active roster? Well, I don't know. Getting 2 more bodies in what is, in my opinion, unquestionably the deepest position in the draft. I think you have to get 2 guys from this class because I don't know how the defensive line class is going to look in 2017, but I know that you can get 2 good players this year for sure. So, Ryan, who is your favorite fit for the Packers? And I'll say this like we said last time. Neither of these need to be considered first-round fits or the best. So, and I'll ask you a different question than obviously in Part D or round 4, but who is your favorite fit for the Packers?
I think it's Andrew Billings from Baylor. I think that's a guy who I would like to see as a potential first-round pick for the Packers. He's a guy who could both be a pass rusher, be a run stuffer. He can play. I think he has the ability to play a couple different spots on the defensive line. We play a lot of two defensive lineman formations when we're in the nickel, when they're in the dime kind of situations. And I think he can play in a couple different spots. I think he can both, like I said, be both a run stopper and a pass rusher, contribute in both situations. And that's if you're going to use a first round pick on a defensive lineman, that's what I want to see. I don't want someone who's just going to be a run stuffer, just going to be a pure nose tackle who's going to plug up the middle, because the Packers don't play that position very much. That's not something I want them to address in round 1. I want somebody who's able to play on multiple downs, play on multiple spots, and I think Billings can do that. I think he's a very good athlete for his size. I think he has the ability to turn into a solid pass rusher and to contribute against the run also. So that's what I'm looking for as the defensive fit is somebody who could both rush the passer and play the run. And I think Billings could do that as a potential target in the first round.
Yeah, I really wish that more national pundits and more Packers fans understood what you and I understand, and that is that a nose tackle in Green Bay's defense plays about 14 snaps a game, and that's not an exaggeration. If the defense is out there for 65 plays, they're in nickel 65 to 70% of the time. That really only leaves a handful of plays that a true nose tackle is even on the field, because in their goal line sets they play at least 4 defensive linemen generally. It's generally a 44 is what they do in short yardage situation, and those guys are playing 1 tech. They're not playing 0. Nobody's over the nose. So I just don't. You can't take a true nose tackle in round 1. I have a real issue with that, and that's why my favorite fit for the Packers on the defensive line would be Vernon Butler from Louisiana Tech. He's a guy at 6'4", 325 that's really that versatile lineman in the Mike Pennell mold that has a little bit more talent than Mike Pennell. Not just because he didn't go to Colorado State Pueblo, because Pennell started his career at Arizona State, but he's certainly a more disruptive player, certainly a guy who disengages from his blockers and makes plays as opposed to just pushing the pocket, which really seems to be Pennell's forte. Certainly Mike Daniels' forte is to push the pocket. And that's not to say anything disparaging about Mike Daniels, but Vernon Butler is a playmaker, separates from his blockers, and I think is the type of guy that you are kind of missing on the defensive line at this point. And that's sort of the point of the whole draft process, is to diversify what you have on offense and defense and fill holes. And I think that that's kind of a hole, especially at 5 tech. And at 6'4", you can certainly play 5 tech. There's no problem with that whatsoever, even at 325 pounds. So Vernon Butler would be my favorite fit. And as far as my favorite player, and his name almost came out of my mouth just because I was fantasizing about the Packers moving up for him, is DeForest Buckner of Oregon. I wrote in the Cheesehead TV draft guide, which of course you can pick up for $8.99 on cheeseheadtv.com, that I believe Buckner would be the best fit for the Packers. I think if you're making a Packers big board, that Buckner is the number one player on it. And I know a lot of people would say, well, it's Miles Jack, or maybe even Joey Bosa, but for me it's not. Buckner at 6'7", 6'8", gives you that Calais Campbell. He might even be a more dynamic player than Calais Campbell. Played a lot of two-man front with Eric Armstead, who is now I believe a San Francisco 49er, taken in the middle of the first round last year, but was certainly a better player than Armstead during his entire career, and I think could even give you a little bit of pass rush off the edge, but would absolutely step into that strong side 5 tech position immediately, and I think team with Mike Daniels to be the best set of 3-4 defensive ends on the planet. So that's my, if they could figure out a way to get him, they won't, but that's kind of my dream guy and my favorite, probably my favorite player in this draft, not just my favorite defensive lineman. Ryan, who's your favorite D-line in this class?
Yeah, I'm right there with you with Buckner. That's you said it also. Buckner and Miles Jack are the two guys that would be. You would think, man, if Ted Thompson wasn't the Packers GM, Thompson's not a guy who's going to trade up into the top 5, top 10, where you're going to need to take those guys. But man, Buckner would look real good alongside Mike Daniels. Like you said, that would be just a dream. If that were to possibly happen, I like Buckner more than Joey Bosa also. So Buckner would be my top defensive lineman. But I think I don't know how you feel about Robert Nkemdiche, but he's a guy who was in that discussion also. Before him, he made some poor life decisions off the field. I don't know how you feel about his potential, but I think that's a guy. If you're looking in the we'll see how NFL teams think about him. But if he's around there in the third round, third round, that's a guy I think I would consider maybe taking the risk of those off-field question marks to get a talent like him. He is a really, really, really good player. And if those, as a first-round guy, I think it's too big of a risk. But when you start getting to the second, third round, that's a guy that I think you have to start looking at because he's a really high-end player who, if he can get past his question marks, if they're just a young guy making some mistakes, that's a guy who could help the defense a ton and be a good value outside of the first round. I don't know what your thoughts are on him.
Yeah, I've certainly seen him mocked to Green Bay in the second round a couple of times, and you always wonder about those like number 1 overall high school player in the country guys. Like Christian Hackenberg too is a guy in this draft class that was supposed to be the second coming at quarterback and just never really got there with Penn State, but at the same time it is a guy that someone's going to take. I mean, it might even be on day 2. I don't think he'll be a first round pick, but that's another guy that really fits that Nkemdiche build. Hackenberg didn't get into trouble, but Nkemdiche certainly did. I think he was on drugs and he jumped out of a hotel room or something. And I mean, there's a lot of things that that worry you about a guy like him. And honestly, his tape isn't that great either. But if you believe in Coach Turgeback, it's certainly something that they would have to consider if you took a Darren Lee or a Reggie Ragland in round one, and you were staring at what you thought might be a defensive line need. I think Nkemdiche definitely has the versatility and length to play all along the line, and if he does get his head on straight, you probably just got, if not a first-round value, possibly even a top 10 value in the second round, much like Dallas maybe or maybe not did last year when they were able to get Randy Gregory. Ryan, speaking of Randy Gregory, you like that segue there?
Yeah, nice job.
Okay, so speaking...
Definitely have that planned, right?
Yeah. So speaking of Randy Gregory, what are your thoughts on the edge class, and how badly do the Packers need to take an edge defender with their first 6 picks?
I think this is another place where you have to start getting some top of the draft talent into the roster. You've got Julius Peppers, who you don't think is going to be around too much longer. You've got Nick Perry on a 1-year deal. I think there's decent odds that he comes back after that, but you never know what happens. So it's not necessarily going to be a need this season, but it's going to be a need pretty soon. So I think I think this is a spot where you have to start looking at taking a guy in the first, second, third round, definitely in the top 6, to start getting some more talent that can contribute. Not necessarily this year, like I said, but coming into 2017, 2018, when there's going to be a need on the outside of the defense in that 3-4, somebody who can rush the passer, somebody who can step into that Julius Peppers, Nick Perry role. It's certainly something that I think should start to be addressed in this draft. I don't know if it's a first round guy. There are a couple guys that I know you and I both like. I think I'd like to see them go in some different directions in the first round, but to get somebody in the second round, get somebody in the third round, at least address somebody with one of those comp picks. I think it's pretty necessary that we get at least one guy with one of those top 6 picks.
Yeah, I agree, and that, of course, will, again, take care of whether they need to draft one at all. I think you do need to take one. This class is very thin. I also evaluated this for the draft guide, and I don't particularly care for a lot of the guys that come after the first 6 or 7. And I'm a little bit torn on this just because, and I know you like him too, but I have like a weird thing about Jayrone Elliott. I'm not convinced that if he got 600 snaps a season, he wouldn't be a 10-sack guy. Like I really like Jayrone Elliott, and he does hold up against the run. So that's a guy I think that you could maybe, I don't know what his contract looks like as a UDFA, but if you locked him up for 3 years or something after this season and just said, we're going to go with Jayrone and Clay as the outside linebackers, and you fortified the defensive line and you drafted an off-the-ball linebacker, I think you could be fine. At the same time, I just know how Thompson feels about pass rushers, and they're going to take one, and that's fine. I mean, you absolutely can. So as much as I think you can get by with Jayrone Elliott, and maybe he might even be a star just sort of waiting to happen, they are going to take a guy, and that's fine. I mean, I have no issue with that. Ryan, who's your favorite fit at edge for Green Bay?
I would like to see them as far as a fit. With Noah Spence out of Eastern Kentucky, I think he could go in there and fill in and be that depth behind the guys we talked about, the Peppers, the Perrys, compete with Jayrone Elliott to step up and be the guy to take over that flame when those guys inevitably are no longer on the roster. I think that would be a nice fit. I don't think he's a guy who's going to come in right away and be and be a star. But I think he could be a value down the road once that need opens up. I think that would be the best way to go. I don't know if I would. I don't know if that would be my favorite pick for the first round, but I certainly wouldn't be upset if that was the first round pick. If he's there at 27, I think that'd be a really nice fit at edge as far as meeting our needs.
Yeah, I like Spence. I've taken him in a couple mock drafts. I think that's a guy. He stays at Ohio State. You're probably talking about, one of the main narratives being, oh my God, the two top edge defenders in this class played on the same defensive line. How crazy is that? Because I think that Spence and Bosa would be probably considered the two top edge guys in the class, and that it would be wild that those two could both go in the same, in the top 10. And oh my God, how did they not win the national championship? It's actually, after evaluating just this draft class as a whole, how did Ohio State not win the NFC South is like my question. That I'm kind of blown away by the amount of pro talent Urban Meyer was able to, first of all, recruit, and good for him, and second of all, not win a national championship with. I think is the other very serious question about all that. But Spence is an interesting guy. My favorite guy is Leonard Floyd, because he can actually, and I know this is weird for an edge defender, but he can cover his ass off. And I think that he's maybe a slighter guy. Reminds me a lot of Jamie Collins of the Patriots, who they do all sorts of stuff with, including matching him up with tight ends because of his length and his speed. And Floyd definitely has that kind of speed. I think he's a guy that you could play all sorts of crazy games with Clay Matthews, as who's coming off the edge, who's in the middle. You could stick. I think if you've got Floyd, Peppers, Ryan, and Matthews out there, you would never know who's doing what and who's matching up with who. I think it could be an absolute riot. I think he has pass rush ability as a true edge defender that is just fine. But I think that his versatility would be a tremendous weapon. And then maybe you get like a Tyler Matakevich or Jatavis Brown, both of which have completely different skill sets, but would provide one or the other, which would, in the later rounds. Floyd, I think, is really a top prospect, and I ranked him extremely highly. I think that there's an okay chance, not a certainty, that he would even be available when the Packers pick. And then that answers my question for the next question, which is who is my favorite. It really is Leonard Floyd. I think he's a unique talent, and I think he's a tremendous talent and a guy that I would very much like to see in Green Bay one way or another. I know I've gotten not a lot, but some blowback on that. Some guys give me the Barkevius Mingo, because Barkevius is so skinny, that type of comp, but I just don't see it. You watch what he did at Georgia. That's the best conference in college football, and so that's a guy I really like. Ryan, who's your favorite fit, and then who's your favorite edge defender in this class?
Yeah, my answer's the same too. Spence would be my favorite guy. This is a situation where I think the best fit. You could end up getting the best fit and the best the guy I like the best with that first round pick at pick 27 in the first round. So I think Spence is my favorite. I think he's the legitimate chance to be the Packers' first pick at 27.
All right, let's move to the position that everybody wants and that everybody's wanted for about the last 4 drafts, and that is off-the-ball linebacker, which in our defense is the 2 inside linebackers. It hasn't really been a position of any sort of solidification since after the Super Bowl, when everybody thought that Hawk and Bishop were going to just ride off into the sunset together for the next decade as the inside linebacker group, because Bishop tore his calf muscle and was never the same, and it turns out that Hawk wasn't good, and that 2010 was a little bit fluky. They took care of one starter in your and I's estimation. We think that Jake Ryan can be a perfectly good inside linebacker in our 3-4 defense. People love to point to that time that David Johnson beat him on an arrow route. Well, guess what, kids? David Johnson's going to beat a lot of people on a lot of arrow routes for the rest of his career, and you don't have to play a pass-catching back of that quality every year. Also, maybe don't design a defense that leaves your rookie fourth-round inside linebacker one-on-one with one of the best pass-catching running backs in football. That would be maybe an X's and O's thing, the suggestion, if you will, that I would have. Ryan, how badly do the Packers need to draft an inside linebacker in their first 6?
Pretty badly. I think this would kind of same as going into last year. This is right up there with the top needs on the entire roster. I think it's definitely you have to take one. You got to get somebody else in there who can possibly slip in and play next to Jake Ryan. You know, who knows how Sam Barrington's going to be able to come back. I know I liked him as a player before the injury. We'll see if he's able to come back to that caliber. But even if he does, it'd be really nice to get another inside linebacker in there, somebody who can basically fill in that inside linebacker depth, allow Clay Matthews to go back to the outside. I still think you're going to see Clay get moved around a fair amount, but if you can have Matthews playing more outside and have a rotation of Barrington, of Jake Ryan, and then somebody we take in the first few rounds of this draft, I think that would help out the defense a whole lot. So I think this is one of the big needs. You got to take one of these guys with those first 6 picks.
I agree, and I'm talking myself into more and more guys. Again, we've already taken care of, do they need to draft one, period? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even be mad if they took 2 guys with some potential. I'm not sure what the odds of that are, especially for how long we've wanted them to just at least take one. But, you definitely look at this position in the first round. Doesn't seem like a very Ted Thompson thing to do. Although the same could have been said about safety, and then the best safety in the 2014 draft fell into his lap, and he took him. The Jets fell in love because of Rex Ryan. They fell in love with Calvin Pryor because Calvin Pryor hits people. Well, unfortunately for Jets fans, he's not the player that HaHa Clinton Dix is, and he ended up obviously on the Packers. I'm not sure if that'll happen again this year, just because someone's probably going to talk themselves into Myles Jack. I know people are concerned. People are worried about the fact that he is eventually going to need to have microfracture surgery and lose some of his explosiveness, which, of course, is what makes him an elite player. But you still have to, I think that Jack is going to go, before Green Bay has a chance to pick. And if he is sitting there at 27, you really kind of have to be concerned, I guess. But, I think that that's a position you just have to address in some form or fashion. I also think it's a position that might not get addressed. I mean, it would drive people insane, but it just really wouldn't surprise me that much if he being Ted just says, look, we've got Barrington and Ryan. I've got 2 starters. I'm ready to roll. I've got 2 starters and a dime linebacker. I'm going to spend the rest of my draft capital protecting my quarterback and rushing the passer, which, cool. I mean, that's fine, and that's probably why he's the GM and you and I are not. At the same time, just what taking an inside linebacker would do, I think, for the defense and honestly just for the fan base would certainly be a big deal. Ryan, who's your favorite fit for the Packers at off-the-ball linebacker?
We've talked about this a couple times. I think overall it's Myles Jack is, along with DeForest Buckner, like we said, one of those dream guys, the guy that would be just a perfect fit. Not necessarily a guy I think who's going to be there. As far as somebody more realistic, I think, for me, my favorite fit would be Ragland from Alabama. I think he would be a big help alongside Jake Ryan. You look at those two guys, and I think you see that Desmond Bishop, AJ Hawk combination that works so well in the Super Bowl run. I think you pair those guys, and that's what you have. Then you have Sam Barrington behind him, and you're much more set at inside linebacker than we've been since that Super Bowl run. And that's my best fit there. But also you have to mention the situation with Jalen Smith. That's a guy who I would also think would be a perfect player in the Packers defense. But the big thing with him is that injury. You don't know. Nobody knows what teams are thinking with that. It's pretty well believed that he's not going to play in 2016. He's going to take kind of a redshirt rehab year in his first season, and then after that, who knows if he can come back and be that same type of player. But if he has that chance, that is a guy who would look just incredible in that Packers defense. And if he can get that in the fourth round, because everybody's freaking out about the injury, then that's great. You get possibly a first round talent coming in 2017 after he takes that year off to rehab. I would really like to see Jalen Smith get taken. Probably not with the first 2 round picks, with the risk that goes along with him. Maybe another team thinks that risk is more worth it and takes him in the second round. That remains to be seen. But I would love it if they were able to grab Jalen Smith with one of the later picks in that group of first 6 picks. I would love that, especially. I mean, if they allow, like you said, that would be a situation where you're not necessarily needing. You don't necessarily think Ted needs to address that situation. You take Jalen Smith in the 3rd. You take Jalen Smith in the 4th. You address the defensive line and an edge guy with your first 2 picks, and then you get Jalen Smith coming in at inside linebacker in 2017, and I think the defense would look really nice in that situation. So that's Jalen Smith is the guy I've got a crush on in this draft. I just think the potential value with getting him is I think it's going to be worth it. It's going to be a risk, but I think it's something that's worth taking.
Wouldn't that be something if they took an inside linebacker in the first round and then stashed Jalen Smith in round 4?
Oh man, Reggie Ragland, Jalen Smith, Jake Ryan, inside linebackers. That'll look great.
The natives would no longer be restless.
No, I think that would probably satisfy some feeling.
Yeah, I think my favorite guy in this draft class, and it doesn't always show up on film, is Darren Lee from Ohio State. He's a guy that can just fly, man. I mean, absolutely elite athletic skill, and is a player that I really think you could stick at weak inside linebacker in a 3-4, and if the nose tackle and the other guys, the 3 techs in the nickel can keep him clean, I really think you have tremendous potential for an elite player, especially if Jake Ryan can help out taking on some of those pulling guards and things like that. I think if you keep him clean and you let him fly around and make plays and cover tight ends and cover backs, he is going to fly around and make plays and cover tight ends and cover backs. And it would be his athleticism, if you just compare it to a guy like A.J. Hawk, I think would be unreal. Honestly, I really, really do. I think that it would feel like a revelation. He's so smooth as an athlete. Just needs, I think, to maybe learn how to play football a little bit, and hopefully the Packers, can do that. They've gotten some okay play out of some linebackers that you and I kind of feel like don't have very much talent. Well, this is the complete opposite. This is a guy with all the talent in the world that maybe just needs a little bit of coaching, and is a guy too that might not quite make it to them. So that's certainly a possibility. But that'd be both my favorite guy in the class and my best fit. I mean, Miles Jack is like the perfect linebacker, but at the same time, he might not be ready as well because of his medicals. You might not want to get into the Miles Jack business. I don't know. Ryan, anybody in the linebacker class you want to talk about as being a favorite or a guy to keep an eye on?
Well, I think as far as your pure testing numbers, you have to keep an eye on Deion Jones out of LSU a little bit further down the board. He's a guy that put up some pretty ridiculous speed numbers. Not a guy that's going to go pretty very high, but you grab him as a potential athlete later on in the draft. There also might be some potential of LSU maybe cooking the books a bit with their pro day 40 times, but he kind of lit it on fire at the pro day as far as the 40s concerns. So that's a guy to maybe keep an eye on as a potential talent later on.
Yeah, I really like Jones, and the other guy to keep an eye on is B.J. Goodson of Clemson. Those are two guys that if Green Bay does, like say Hunter Henry lasts to their pick in the second round and they snag him, or they go edge and then defensive line. You're talking about the third and fourth rounds, and maybe they haven't addressed inside linebacker. The natives, again, are restless. Goodson or Jones, I think, while their skill sets might not exactly mesh with Jake Ryan in the way that we talked about a couple other guys, they would be, I think, worthwhile starters. And that's really all that, I care about. Packers fans are like waiting for Luke Kuechly or, Danny Trevathan. Well, yeah, Luke Kuechly was the 9th pick in the draft, but the Broncos got Danny Trevathan and Brandon Marshall in the 5th and 6th rounds. People need to understand that. Just how difficult it is to scout off-the-ball linebackers and when guys can come in and play. I mean, Bobby Wagner makes $1 bazillion for the Seahawks. He was a 6th-round pick, too. Yes, you can take an inside linebacker high and get awesome production. It happens all the time. I've said that for the last 3 years. But you can also get Desmond Bishop, Bobby Wagner, Danny Trevathan in round 6. Maybe Jake Ryan turns into one of those guys in round 4. You never know. And the real elite defenses, like those Seattle teams, built from the edge and the DBs in. And that's how Ted Thompson is building this team. He has one of the best secondaries in football right now and is building his defensive line and his edge, but maybe he goes inside linebacker, maybe he doesn't. Ryan, let's talk DBs. Let's talk corners. Last year, first 2 picks were corner. This year, lost their best slot corners, certainly, to the Chargers. Casey Hayward left. We talked a little bit about that in our first podcast coming back, kind of from the dead there a little bit. How bad do the Packers need to draft a corner in their first 6?
I don't think this is a position that needs to get addressed with those first 6 picks. But then again, we didn't necessarily think corner was going to be taken at the first 2 picks last year. So who knows what Ted Thompson is thinking as far as cornerbacks go. But this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is not something that needs to get addressed necessarily. I wouldn't be upset if they grabbed a guy that Ted likes in the 3rd or the 4th round. But I think the D-backs as a whole are pretty well set. You've got 2 guys coming off of rookie years in Rollins and Randall that really played well and really solidified that cornerback spot. And I don't think it's something that needs to get addressed highly in the draft this season.
I agree, although I certainly, and you kind of already alluded to it, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that kind of stuff does happen, especially with Ted. All of a sudden, you've got guys that he likes and just takes them, and they're not what you thought was positions of need. They end up being pretty okay. I mean, we were all very freaked out when he took a free safety in the first round last year. There's no question about that. We kind of put the pieces together by the end of the night, but I mean, that was something to be concerned about. I think you could see it, especially with those compensatory picks at the end of the fourth round. Ted always likes to keep the cupboard stocked at cornerback, and he did just lose one. I mean, there's no question about it. And I think, too, once you get later in rounds, he does sort of stop looking for need. I mean, he just kind of takes the top guy on his board. He'll tell you he does that all the time, but when you look at, where this team's struggle has been, and it's always, seems like for the last decade been, do we have a defense good enough for Brett or Aaron? Well, most of his, I think all of his first-round picks are either offensive tackles or defensive players, and that's really leaning a lot more towards being defensive players. So you might see. Ryan, do you think they need to draft one, period? That'd be the next question.
Again, I'd say not necessarily. I mean, I'd like to see them take somebody to compete with those guys who are further down the depth chart. But I don't think it's necessary. I wouldn't be upset either way. Basically, is what I'm saying. I think you could go into the off season with the current guys you have, or you can add a guy you like in the fifth round, see if you can go play some special teams, turn into something. Who knows? This is pretty far down the list of needs as far as the Packers are concerned. I guess I would kind of be a little bit surprised if Ted didn't take a guy who could play some corner, but I don't think it would be necessary in this draft to get a guy. I'm pretty happy with the way the cornerback depth chart looks as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Gunter. That's certainly part of it. But I do think that you have to at least think about, where you might be at slot corner. I think that's a real concern. Maybe draft a guy there, and I guess that's what I'll talk about now is my favorite fit. This is a guy that I've kind of caught some flack for wanting in Green Bay or mocking to Green Bay, I guess, and that's Cyrus Jones from the University of Alabama is a player that is maybe shorter than, Ted Thompson has these supposed minimums for certain positions, and he's a guy that I think is shorter than the average Ted Thompson corner, but is such a playmaker and specifically such a punt returner and an excellent one that I think that's a guy that you could really, really see having an effect on the team right away, and then of course down the line as well. I really like him as a player and as a fit. My favorite corner in the draft, though, is William Jackson from Houston. I mean, we talked about things that would or would not surprise us. That'd surprise me at 27, but I'd get a kick out of it. First of all, because people would just freak out. But secondly, because I think that he's got, honest-to-goodness, number one corner ability. And I mean that truthfully. I think that he really is that type of talent, that type of a player. And I think that those are sometimes hard to find. And that I think it would be, I guess, very interesting to add another corner in the first round and see what they do with that defense. But Ryan, who's your favorite fit for the Packers, and who's your favorite corner in this class?
Yeah, that William Jackson idea as a first round pick would certainly be interesting because then you're looking at potentially three of your top four corners all on rookie deals with 3-4 years left on the contract. You don't have to worry about corner after that for a long time if that's the way you want to go. But I think both you and I and most Packer fans would agree that they'd like to go somewhere else. But that would be turning the cornerback position, basically just setting it up for the next handful of years. I don't think that's going to happen. But as far as my best fit is my favorite guy. It's Jalen Ramsey of Florida State. That's a pie in the sky idea. I'm pretty confident in saying he's not going to get taken by the Packers, but man, he is a guy that I think Dom Capers would just go nuts over. He would playing all over the place. I've seen Tyrann Mathieu comparisons to Jalen Ramsey, a guy who can kind of be that hybrid utility defensive back, would be really, really good at it. I think Capers would just go crazy with a guy that talented. You could play him in the outside, play him in the slot, play him at safety, put him all over the place. That would be my favorite fit as far as cornerbacks in the draft, and I think he is he's the best defensive back overall in this draft class.
Yeah, I think he's the best defensive player overall in this draft class. I just don't think you can take him if you're Ted Thompson.
No, that'd be another one of those trade-up situations. Probably, again, into the top 5, where you think maybe Myles Jack, because of injury concerns, has the chance to fall a little bit, and maybe you see him at 15 and he's available, and Ted Thompson trades up there. But I don't think Ted's going up to 4 to get Jalen Ramsey, and I think that's what that would take.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we'll talk about safeties now. This, I think, if I were to rank all the positions of need, this would come in second to last to quarterback. But at the same time, because of what we talked about at the top of the show, and also the potential that Sean Richardson might not play football again, it's maybe not the deepest position in the world. I mean, you could play Chris Banjo. You could certainly play Micah Hyde at free safety. There's no problem with that. Ryan, how bad do the Packers need to draft a safety in their first 6?
I don't think this is a need, like you said, but along those same lines, sure, if you want to get somebody to shore up that depth, I wouldn't be surprised at all if one of those compensatory picks is a guy who could play safety. And again, maybe it's a guy in the second round, like a Jeremy Cash, who could play some safety and come in and play some linebacker. It kind of fills a couple different needs. It's a guy who can be some safety depth behind Clinton Dix and Morgan Burnett, and also a guy who can slide up and play some linebacker, which is also a position of need. So that's where I would say where you could possibly have it. But as far as just taking a pure safety, I don't think it's going to happen in the first 3 rounds. I don't think it is necessary in those first 6 picks. But again, Ted Thompson does some weird stuff, and if you're looking down the road at some potential needs, maybe safety's a guy that they've got somebody that they really like and is a 4th round pick or something. But I don't think you really badly need to take someone in those first 6 picks.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree. I think you have to draft one. I mean, that's the next question up on the docket. Right? Do you think you have to draft one? It's because of the lack of depth?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Get one somewhere. Somebody who you can at least compete and push Banjo as that third guy, push Micah Hyde as that kind of the next guy in line for snaps. Should Burnett or Clinton Dix get hurt or something like that. So I think you do need to get somebody on the roster who can play safety. But yeah, you get one guy. It doesn't really matter where it is. There's a lot of different ways you can go with guys playing safety, but one guy is probably necessary.
Yeah, and then, we talked about in the pre-production meeting as well. We did talk about getting that guy that can maybe play linebackers. Well, I guess that's sort of what I'm talking about. We also talked about Morgan Burnett having an expiring deal after 2017 and potentially a 5th or 6th round pick kind of guy that could step in for Burnett in the 2018 season. I understand that that's a long way down the road, but it certainly wouldn't be the first time that Ted Thompson has stocked the cupboard for somebody whose contract expires the next season and not immediately. He just likes to build his rosters with talent, and that's certainly something to be admired. Who's your favorite fit for the Packers, Ryan, at the safety position of the guys that you've looked at?
I think it's probably Cash out of Duke, a guy who can, like we said, maybe potentially down the road, filling in for Morgan Burnett once he's maybe moves on. He's a guy who's good against the run, who can move up and plays a little bit of linebacker. That's probably my favorite spot, or my favorite fit. Not a guy who you're going to need to take in the first round, I don't think, but a guy who can kind of fit some different needs, be versatile and play some different spots, fulfill some different needs, possibly be Morgan Burnett's replacement down the road. I think that's your best fit as far as safeties go. Then probably one of the only guys I'd really be comfortable with in the first 3 rounds as far as safeties go.
My favorite fit is I think it's got to be Cravens from USC. I think he's a pretty good player and definitely a guy, when you watch him play, you think those are linebacker plays that he's making. I mean, those are good linebacker plays. Maybe a guy that you worry about, getting beat up, but at the same time, I think you're probably fine. I think you'd be okay, to be honest with you, with Cravens at inside linebacker if you could keep him clean. And I know I keep saying that, but that really is the big concern, is keeping that weak side inside linebacker clean, no matter who it is. But I think that's your Deion Buchanan right there, is Su'a Cravens. My favorite safety in the class, though, is the Joseph kid from West Virginia. I think that's another guy where if Ted took him, people would just go nuts, but I'd laugh because I could instantly see how Capers would use him in that hybrid role, play a lot of 3 safety, 3 corner looks, and then have Joseph take over for Burnett eventually. But you could play, I think Joseph is another guy who hits hard enough to play weak side inside linebacker. But definitely a player where if you watch him, it's a lot of entertainment because he comes for real. Ryan, who's your favorite safety in the class?
I think I agree with you. I think it's Joseph from West Virginia. That's I don't think I like him enough to warrant him as the 27th pick. I don't really think I like any of these safeties, unless you want to consider Jalen Ramsey a safety. But I just don't like any of these guys enough to be okay with it at 27. But I think Joseph is probably my favorite safety in the draft.
All right, well, that'll do it for the From the Benches draft preview. We hope you enjoyed offense. We hope you enjoyed defense today for sure. I'd like to thank you, as always, for listening to the show. The best thing that you could do for us would be to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating. We prefer those with 5 stars, and also leave a comment. It helps us come up sooner when people search for the Packers, people search for Aaron Rodgers, things like that on iTunes, and we always appreciate any support you guys might be able to give us. Also, check out that, I know I did a couple of shameless plugs for it today, check out that draft guide on cheeseheadtv.com. I think it's certainly newsstand quality at the very least, and at the same time, I don't think that there's probably a better resource for Packers fans specifically on the draft. I really don't think you're going to find one. I think that if you have it up on your iPad or print it off, that you're going to find a better companion to watch the draft with this week. I think you'll really enjoy it. Follow us. You can follow me at Ross Uglum on Twitter. You can follow Ryan
at Hillisland358.
And you can follow the show at From the Benches. You can also follow the network at Packers Talk Net. Thanks again, everybody, and go Pack Go.
From the benches. From the benches.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If a Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or nonprofit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.